Today, the topic is transition through change. And I tried to think of the most profitable thing that I could teach this week. And the theme that kept reoccurring in conversations over and again was the word transition. And change and transition are not the same thing. Transition is internal, whereas change is external. Change is thrust upon you by someone else or a decision you made, but transition is what you do with that change. And any goal that we set in order to better our lives will always cause us to transition through change. And any calamity that happens, is going to also cause us to go through these steps of transition. And my goal is to help us see when our life begins to change that we typically go through a few steps mentally and emotionally. And if we can understand these, then it won't be such a shock or won't stay as such a shock. So we have to begin at the end. And it's been said that we should begin with the end in mind. A lot of motivational speakers talk about that. And it's the essence of all goal setting. Ecclesiastes 7:8 says, finishing is better than starting. Everybody wants to finish. A lot of people don't want to take the time or the work to get started. See, transitioning through change is usually uncomfortable because we're experiencing something new. Something unexpected. And we leave the familiar and experience the unfamiliar. Matthew 11:28 from the Message says, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. See, Jesus Christ knew how to do this. His life was transition. And on a recent flight, I was seated next to a well-dressed businessman, and I asked him what he did, and he said that he retired from being an international manager for this huge corporation. And for 35 years, he traveled the world and set up businesses and taught business people how to carry on successful businesses. And then he said now he works with ministries to help their ministers get secular professions before they go into a life of service. And I said, well, why? And he said this way they won't become dependent upon a group or upon the big givers in their group, thus compromising their beliefs and getting burned out. And he asked what I did, and I told him I ran a small non-profit teaching ministry to unaffiliated Christians. I thought that was a nice way to say it. And he asked if my audience was the nuns or the duns. And I said, explain. And he said that the nuns are people who've rejected their beliefs for whatever reason. And he said the duns are the de-churched people who were once the most dedicated and active people in their congregations, but because of boredom or mistreatment, now they're just done. See, each of these duns will experience transition. Anytime you leave a ministry, a group, a family, or whatever, even a job, we're going to go through a transition. See, everyone experiences transition at one time or another, and Jesus gave us a template for success through this prophet. See, we learn to keep our heart fixed on the unforced rhythm of life. We learn to live light and live free, like we read earlier. So situational or psychological. See, change is situational. Transition is psychological. Change is something that changes your situation. Transition is the mental and emotional process we go through while going through that change. See, everyone handles transition differently. And to some, it's an adventure or an opportunity to grow, while others sorrow over what was lost or what could have been. See, change can happen immediately, but transition always takes a period of time. Change in schools is change. When I was a kid, we always changed in the middle of a school year. When my dad got restationed, it was always January. And so change in schools isn't that hard, but transitioning into the social structure of that school is a whole nother thing. Graduating from college is a nice change, but finding a job in your field will take you through a transition likened unto an emotional roller coaster. Just talk to some of the young kids now. Losing your source of income is an unwelcome change. But dealing with the loss of income will force a personal transition and will show us each what we're made of. And losing one's health is one of the largest changes a person or a family member can go through. But dealing with their loss is a necessary transition for them all, not just the person going through the health situation. You know who Stephen Hawking is? He said, quote, "I have noticed even people who claim everything is predestined and that we can do nothing to change it, look before they cross the road." So, a Swiss psychiatrist named Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did some notable work on the transition through grief and bereavement back in 1969. And she came up with 5 basic stages of grief that have helped people make sense of traumatic times. It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And those are her 5 steps. They're not the only 5 steps, but that's what she did. And since then, many people outside this grief counseling field adapted Kubler-Ross's work to help them deal with their workforce in trying to implement a difficult project. So business people and motivational speakers just readapted it. I'm going to readapt it for this teaching into 4 points. And for ease of recall, I'm going to term them fall, winter, spring, and summer. An emotional fall, winter, spring, and summer. And 1, fall, that's the shock phase when you're going through a transition. I liked it the way it was. 2 is winter, and that's the anger phase. This is too hard. I didn't sign up for this. 3 is spring, which is the growth phase. I'm beginning to get it. I'm feeling better. And then 4 is summer. It's just the building phase or the rebuilding. It becomes the new normal. It's the end of a cycle. And transition is moving from something familiar into something unfamiliar. See, the beginning of every journey is the end of another. And now we're going to look at a few famous biblical characters who dealt with each of these steps. Because if we know what to expect, if we're prepared to transition through that change, it's going to be easier to make it out the other side with fewer emotional scars. And we see people stuck in the transition process. They never get past the hopeless feeling. They never get out of the anger. Or they just continue to spin their wheels in the springtime of new change, and they don't build from there. So now we're going to start with fall, the shock phase. Sort of, I liked it the way it was. And this is usually the first transitional step when we experience a curveball in life. We usually experience shock or denial, and we're not sure we're ready for another change. You ever felt that way? I don't really want to do this. I don't like this. You know, I had a boss that used to say, the only one who likes change are those with dirty diapers. Genesis 17, I'm going to read 15 through 17 from the Amplified. And God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah, princess, her name shall be. And I will bless her and give you a son also by her. Yes, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a son? You know, having a child is usually a joyous event when you're 30. But being 90 or 100 would be a whole nother story. And most 90-year-olds are a bit set in their ways. And the more set you are in your ways, the harder a transition will be. I had a friend whose mom was a rather large woman, and they had a bunch of kids, too many to even count. And one time she had a home birth and didn't even realize she was pregnant until she was given birth. I know it's crazy, you know, but it's wild. I mean, that's just a surprise. You know? You go into the restroom and whoa, surprise. Oh man, Genesis 18, 9 through 13 from the Voice. 3 angels speaking to Abraham. Where is Sarah, your wife? Abraham. She's right there in the tent. One of the men. I will return here to you when life emerges from the womb of your wife Sarah. She will give birth to a son. Now Sarah was behind her guests, listening to all of this from the entrance of the tent. Abraham and Sarah were quite old at this time, well advanced in years, and Sarah had long ago gone through menopause. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying under her breath, at my age, old and decrepit, as is my husband, both of us long past having any desire to engage in lovemaking? But the Eternal heard what Sarah said and addressed Abraham, Eternal One, via an angel. Why does Sarah laugh and say to herself, there is no way I'm going to give birth at my age? Is anything too difficult for the Eternal One to accomplish? At that time, I will return here to you when life emerges from her womb. I'm telling you, Sarah will give birth to a son. See, Sarah laughed because she was in shock and disbelief. She had wanted to have a child. But now she's 90. You know, when she heard these 3 angels disguised as men say that she was going to have a baby, she was hit with that first step of transition. Shock. She laughed. She was 90 years young. Her husband was almost 100. And making love was just a fond memory. And after having gone through change of life and giving up on the possibility of having a child of her own, now she gets a second chance. When you first realized a major change in your life, be it a move, a loss of health or finances, or just a new addition to your family, know that you will typically go through these steps every time. And to have a knowledge of this will help us to transition and not get stuck. You know, when your life suddenly heads in a different direction, know that that shock and that puzzlement or that denial will usually be the first of a few emotional steps we're going to transition through. Winter. The anger phase. This is too hard. I don't like this. I don't like this feeling. Now we transition into winter, the anger or frustration phase. You know, this isn't what I signed up for. You ever said that or thought that? David Foster Wallace once said, quote, "Everything I've ever let go of has claw marks on it." End of quote. Most people, they don't want to let go. Sort of, what's that term? You get dragged kicking and screaming, right? Like trying to pull your kid out of the toy aisle. You know. Remember the story of Jonah. You know, he got mad when God asked him to go speak the word to the people of Nineveh. And he hated these people. So he hops on a ship, heads towards Spain, the total opposite way. And in his depression, he tells the crew to throw him overboard and that they would be saved. They throw him overboard. Sea goes calm. Fish gulps him down, dives down towards the bottom of the Mediterranean. You see, he dies right after he gave this short little prayer. 3 days and 3 nights later, he's vomited out near the land. He brushes off the chunks and he walks 400 miles to Nineveh. Nineveh was a horrible city, a grand enemy. I mean, Nineveh, they used to skin people and then put their skins, they plastered the outside of their city walls with people's skins, like people put, heads and deer heads and stuff in their houses. I mean, it wasn't a nice place. These were mean people. But they were going through a time and they were at a weakened state. And Jonah thought that just maybe they're going to get beat finally. Now God wants them to go speak the word. Tells them they're going to change. They're going to respond. Well, he does. And everyone believes. And he's mad. Jonah's pissed. Jonah didn't want to go, and he sure wanted Nineveh to fail, but God sees things differently. Sometimes you go through a change and you think, why did I have to go through it? And then you meet somebody, or then you get introduced to a new way of thinking that helps you. There can always be great light at the end of any transition. And that's where we want to get to. You know, begin with that end in mind. Now, I'm just going to read a little bit from Jonah. You don't have to turn there, but I'm going to read Jonah 3:10. And God saw their works. This is after he had talked to the people of Nineveh. He saw their works, they turned from their evil way, and God repented of the evil that he had said that he would do unto them, and he did it not. Then chapter 4 here, verse 1, but it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was very angry, and he prayed unto God, to the Lord, and said, I pray thee, O Lord, was not this my saying when I was yet in my country? Therefore I fled unto Tarshish, for I knew that thou art a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness, and repentest thee of evil. Therefore now, O Lord, take, I beseech thee, my life from me, for it's better for me to die than to live. Then said the Lord, doest thou well to be angry? See, Jonah told God that he'd rather die than see this transition go through. Now that's crazy. He'd already proved he was willing to die once before because he didn't like it, right? Throw me overboard. See, when your life's not going the way you expected, and you get to the point of anger, or you're so angry you just want to quit, know that you're getting closer to transitional springtime. It should be a sign to you. When you feel that way, then you're just one step closer to where you really want to get to. It's just a mindset. See, it's the in the final trimester of Jesus' earthly ministry, he told Peter that he was going to get tortured and that he was going to be killed. And Peter basically freaked, and he got really mad. Now, it was a little too much information, TMI. And in Matthew 16:21 through 23, it says, "From that time forth, Jesus began to show unto his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised again the third day. Then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, Be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee." Peter grabbed Jesus, pulled him out of the crowd, looked him right in the eyes and said, "This is not going to happen. Not on my watch." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan, for thou art an offense unto me. For thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men." See, Peter, really, he just didn't want Jesus to die now. Peter had left his family, his business, put his life on hold to follow this Jesus guy. Peter reacted with anger, and Jesus responded in kind. The only other time Jesus ever said, "Get behind me, Satan," was to whom? The devil. I mean, that's only 2 times it's in the Bible. He said it once to the devil, "Get behind me, Satan," and he said it to Peter. Peter just had to be slapped, he had to be woken up out of this stupor of anger. And it's funny, the word behind means to send to the back of the line. Get behind me, Satan. Get behind, even to Peter or the devil. Get back in the back of the line. And you ever stepped into a line thinking that you were at the end, only to be showed that the real end of the line is way down there? I was at the DMV last week to renew my driver's license, and the place seemed empty. I think I was the only person in there. There were 23 desks with 23 workers, and nobody was sitting at any of those desks. They gave me a number, 500. Then I heard the announcement, "Now serving number 151. I thought, what? I'm the only one in here. And I waited for an hour. And all these workers are just talking to each other behind there. And then the next announcement was, "The computer system is down statewide." And I thought, what? So I walk up to the person in charge and I said, "What is going on here?" So I had to leave and come back. But what I was thinking is when we feel hurt or angry, feel like we've been treated unjustly, the sooner we put that anger behind us and send anger to the back of the line, the sooner we're going to move on to the growth phase. Now, some people, they really enjoy that phase, that anger phase. They enjoy it. Sometimes it's hard to get out of because you've been hurt so deeply. But it's always good to do it. Like Ephesians 4:26 and 27 says, "Be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil." Send him to the back of the line. Send anger to the back of the line. You ever flown on an airplane heading west and you kept up with the sun? It seemed like the sunset just kept setting and setting. It just goes on and on and on. See, you're staying just a little bit ahead of the night. You're facing into the light. See, step 2 was don't let that anger get the best of you. Keep ahead of your anger. Put it behind you and move forward towards springtime. It's just one season away. It's the next step in the transition. If you're there, you're close. You're so close. You're past the shock. You went through the anger. Now it's like, okay, now I'm going into this growth phase. Spring, the growth phase. I'm beginning to get it. I'm just beginning to feel comfortable with this change. And a lot of times it's uncomfortable to change. It's not easy. You know, you got so used to living a certain way, and now we're living a different way. See, we're getting somewhere now in this springtime. It's the growth phase of transition. You gardeners understand this. Now, but the thing about springtime, are those plants as hardy as they are in midsummer? No. It's like my brother once told me. He said, start in anything, any transition, you're like a new plant. And it has to be protected a little more than a full-grown plant. And so springtime, you're still vulnerable. You see, but it is that growth phase. We're learning how to cope. We're still learning how to deal, but we're growing. We feel like we're gaining control of that part of our life again. Philippians 3:13 and 14 from the Message, I guess it's 12 through 14. I'm not saying that I have this all together, that I have made it, but I'm well on my way, reaching out for Christ, who has so wondrously reached out for me. Friends, don't get me wrong. By no means do I count myself an expert in all of this, but I've got my eye on the goal. Where God is beckoning us onward to Jesus, I'm often running and I'm not turning back. At this point, you don't want to go back to winter. You're sick of winter by springtime. I think about here in Colorado. When spring's finally here, which sort of is like summer, it's either winter or summer pretty much here. But it's so nice, the change. And, you know, Paul leaned into the wind. He put his face in the sunshine and he just moved forward. He kept his eye on the goal. What's your ultimate goal? Where do you really want to get? You see, if you find yourself stuck in any one of these places, figure out how to get to the next step, which I'll hit a set of verses in a few minutes that'll really help. I mean, even like Hebrews 12:2 says, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of God. Jesus had to go through those transitions. Do I really have to drink from this cup? He went through them, but he went through them quickly. Boom, 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 boom. But not my will, but thy will. Boom, 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 boom. See, we look unto Jesus, who kept his eyes on the prize and transitioned through hell in order to help us. So step 3 was, you know, we get through this. We get through this challenging time. We've gone through the shock, the anger, and the beginnings of that growth process, that tender growth, those tender growing pains. And now we're going to head into full-blown summer, which will become our new normal. My mom had this dog that liked to roam. And she had some property in Texas, and this dog was gone for a number of days. And then it came back with only 3 legs. And some farmer had shot off one of the legs because it was on their property. And I remember that dog didn't seem to care if it had 3 legs or 4. You know, it still wanted its head scratched at just the right place. It still chased cars and still roamed. But they don't go through this. They're not wired like people. They don't go through that same introspective, thought process. They gnaw their paw off and they just keep living. They do something, they just keep living. But we analyze, and it's good that we do, because we have to help other people go through these changes. These changes help us help other people. You see, I mean, as we learn to do it, it's much easier to help other people do it. So summer, the building phase, the new normal. This is the end game, the goal accomplished, our new way of life. Whether we wanted it or not, we have to get to summertime if we're going to ever really build and accomplish anything. It'd be like starting to build a house, you frame it out and then never finish it. That's sort of like getting to springtime. You see, you got to finish it if you want to get paid. This is where we adapt and conquer instead of flounder and flee. Now I don't need to say much about this phase because this is where we all feel the most comfortable. Transition isn't happening now. You're at the end of that transition. It's both a new beginning and an ending. It's a new beginning because we're comfortable, but with anytime you get to that place, usually you're going to transition into something else after that. We just keep growing, right? Isn't that the process of growth? Richard Shelby said, quote, "If there's not an end game, we're in quicksand. We take one more step and we're still there, and there's no way out," end of quote. When I was a Boy Scout, we used to camp at Grapevine Lake between Fort Worth and Dallas. And at that time, there were no houses at all along the muddy banks of Grapevine Lake. It was wonderful brown, muddy water. And one time, we found this huge mud pit that was about 30 feet across. And it just looked wonderful. So as my manner was, I ran as fast as I could into this mud. And then as I got in, up to my waist, I realized I started sinking deeper and deeper. And by the time I got the 30 feet across there, I was almost up to my neck. But at the other side, at the wall of mud that was on the other side, there were some tree roots that were hanging down. And I grabbed those tree roots and pulled myself out. And then we all just started timing ourselves, seeing how fast we could get across this mud pit. We only lost one boy that day. Just kidding. Just kidding. Jim Rohn said, if you don't like how things are, change it. You're not a tree. You may want to turn here, Psalm 77. And this is how someone dealt with deep emotional pain and went through all these steps of transition. Remember, Psalms was songs that were committed to memory that every Judean kid would learn. And when the situation in life would come up, you'd revert back to that song that you'd committed to memory. Remember, people can remember songs more than they can remember anything else. You remember songs from when you were a child. And so you sing yourself through these problems. So now we're going to see first step one, which is the season is fall, and shock is the reaction here. 77, verse 1. I yell out to my God. I yell with all my might. I yell at the top of my lungs. He listens. See, he didn't like what life had dealt to him. Now he goes right to step 2, which is the winter season or anger. I found myself in trouble and went looking for my Lord. My life was an open wound that wouldn't heal. When friends said, everything will turn out all right, I didn't believe a word they said. I remember God and shake my head. I bow my head, then wring my hands. I'm awake all night, not a wink of sleep. I can't even say what's bothering me. I go over the days one by one. I ponder the years gone by. I strum my lute all through the night, wondering how to get my life together. Now we're going to hit 6 questions that smack of our emotional winter. Verse 7. Will the Lord walk off and leave us for good? Will he never smile again? Is his love worn threadbare? Has his salvation promise burned out? Has God forgotten his manners? Has he angrily stalked off and left us? You ever thought like that? Where's God? Where are you right now, God? I have. I've wondered. You're in this deep, dark hole. You're going down. The mud's sucking you under. You know? Just my luck, I said. The high God goes out of business just the moment I need him. Where are you, God? Is that winter or what? That's full-blown sub-zero winter of the soul. Step 3, spring season or growth. Now notice the mental shift. All of a sudden this guy, once again, I'll go over what God has done, lay out on the table the ancient wonders. I'll ponder all the things you've accomplished and give a long, loving look at your acts. Oh God, your way is holy. No God is great like God. Now step 4, the summer season, the rebuilding, comfortable in your own skin again. He's past the shock, past the anger, even past that new growth. Here we are. You're the God who makes things happen. You showed everyone what you can do. You pulled your people out of the worst kind of trouble, rescued the children of Jacob and Joseph. I love it. See, as we transition through any change, let's keep in mind that God has our back and can and will help us at every level, at any season of transition in our life, be it fall, winter, spring, or summer. Let's transition through those changes of them all. See, we can get through any situation in life if we want to, but know that we're going to hit these points that seem difficult. First, it's going to be a shock. You didn't want this to happen. Next, you're going to get angry. Why did it happen to me? Why did you let it happen to me, God? Then it's like, okay, I get it. I'm growing now. I'm getting through this situation. And finally, it's like, it's your new normal. And you're living again. So when you hit one of those, know that the next one's just right around the corner. And it'll help you get through these transitions. God bless.